I dialed my son's number with the kind of care you use when turning the last page of a fragile book. It was a bright afternoon. The lace curtains in my living room breathed with the breeze, and the kettle clicked off behind me with a soft, faithful sound. When he answered, I smiled into the phone. "Lucas, sweetheart, have you and Alina set a date? I want to find a dress early." I imagined him rolling his eyes playfully and saying, "Soon, Mama. We'll make it special." But it wasn't his voice that answered. It was hers. Alina stepped through my doorway at the very same moment. She had a key. Bright lipstick, hair pinned like she belonged on a magazine cover. She clicked her phone onto speaker and placed it on my coffee table as if it were a declaration. "When are we planning to marry?" She repeated with a soft laugh that felt like a blade's edge. "Oh, Marta, we already got married. Last week." She set her purse down like a final period at the end of my sentence. It was very small, you know. Just the inner circle. The inner circle. Those two words landed the way winter does, without apology. I stood there, the handset heavy in my palm, while my son's face hovered in the hallway mirror, refusing to look directly at me. I watched Alina fold herself into the corner of my sofa, the one I'd bought for their first apartment, when the springs in theirs started to poke through the cushions I'd financed. Her dress was cream, a casual kind of elegant, and all I could think of was the pale dove-gray dress hanging in my closet, still tagged, with the shoes I'd ordered so I wouldn't outshine the bride, and the beaded shawl I'd told myself would photograph beautifully. I had tucked away 9 crisp $100 bills in an envelope labeled wedding gift, because blessings should feel like more than paper. I had planned a tray of small pastries I would deliver the morning of the ceremony, the kind with lemon glaze that Lucas loved since he was little. I even cleaned the photograph frames in the hallway so the house would shine if they stopped by afterward. I had called my sister Lydia in Milwaukee to tell her the good news and asked whether she could come for the weekend. I swept under furniture most people never move. Everything I touched had been touched for them. Now Alina stretched, checking her lipstick in the black reflection of my television. "It was intimate," she said, as if I had been the one to ask permission. "Just us, the officiant, and, well, close family." Close family. I saw the photos later, of course. A rooftop, a string of lights, her mother's arm looped through hers, her father clasping Lucas's shoulder, her brother pouring champagne into tall, thin flutes. Alina's dress, a lace slope of white I recognized because she'd asked me for a little extra for alterations. $800 had vanished from my account that day, while she smiled at the seamstress and practiced her "I do" smile in the mirror. I had become very good, over the last 3 years, at finding ways to move money quickly. Rent, because the landlord was impatient. Groceries, because the card had a glitch. The couch, because the old one hurt her back. Shoes for interviews, because the right shoes change a life. I was the river that arrived before the rain clouds formed. I told myself that was a mother's job. "Congratulations," I heard myself say, though it arrived sounding like a stranger. Lucas lifted his eyes and then lowered them. Penalty box shame. "Mama," he said and swallowed. "We just wanted to keep it simple. No fuss." "In the photos," I said gently, "I counted 19 people." Alina tilted her head. "A small 19, she replied, with a smile that asked me to be reasonable. I looked at the envelope with 9 bills in it, tucked in my desk, and thought of everything money could buy but couldn't purchase me a place at. A ceremony, a promise, the image of my son holding his bride, while I clapped. That night, I slept like someone who had forgotten how. When I did drift, my dreams were full of chairs being set up at a party I wasn't allowed to attend. In the morning the kettle clicked, and the house breathed, and my throat hurt from the silence I had tried to swallow. A week later the phone rang while I was pruning basil in the kitchen sink. "Marta," Alina said, skipping hello. "We're short. The rent is past due. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, He'll begin the eviction process. You forgot the transfer, I think. Could you please hurry? We're under a lot of stress." Her voice caught in that way people think sounds like sincerity. I looked at the green leaves between my fingers. I thought of all the mornings I'd stood at the bank waiting for the doors to open, because an emergency had grown teeth overnight. "Alina," I said gently, "I thought you only invited your inner circle." It was quiet for a long time. "I don't understand," she said, but her voice had lost its polish. "We're family." I could hear Lucas in the background, a low, anxious thunder. "We have always been special to you," she added, and that word hung there, a balloon someone had let go of. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain how many nights I had eaten soup stretched too thin, so I could press a little more into their lives. I didn't list the transfers, the receipts, the sofa, the vacuum, the winter coats on sale in July because planning is love. I simply said, "I will not make the transfer." And then I set the phone on the counter and let the basil leaves drip. In the quiet that followed, I took out a notebook from the bottom drawer, the one with the cracked brown cover that used to hold recipes, and now held numbers. And I wrote everything down. Not guesses, not feelings. Numbers. Rent at $600 a month for 30 months. 18,000. Groceries I'd carried up their narrow stairs when the fridge was empty. Maybe 200 a month in fits and starts that stacked to 6,000. A Christmas where I bought Alina a coat she said she needed for work. A birthday where Lucas's watch needed a better band. A dentist bill. They forgot. A car repair that lasted longer than the car. A small loan to tide them over that never tided back. The couch. The vacuum. The mattress when her back hurt again. The numbers made their own kind of noise. When I added them quietly, the pen tapped to tell me what I hadn't wanted to say out loud. $31,860. A number that could have been Europe. A kitchen remodel. 10,000 cups of coffee with friends I had stopped seeing because I was always rushing to put out someone else's fire. The phone lit up and darkened and lit again. Lucas. Then Alina. Then unknown, which usually means a familiar number wearing a mask. I let them pass like weather. I walked that afternoon, for no reason except that the sky was finally blue, and because walking is how you teach your heart the shape of your ribs again. I passed the park where Lucas used to run down the hill and scream at the geese, and I almost laughed at the memory of him thinking he could outrun birds. When did the boy who used to fall asleep in the back seat with a paper crown on his head become the man who could say, "inner circle," with a straight face? When did I begin confusing love with paid bills? When did money become my language for "please love me"? At the bank, the glass doors showed my reflection. Hair pulled back, the same black cardigan I've worn since the winter after my husband died. A face that had learned how to be last in line. The manager, Mr. Meyer, stepped out of his office when he saw me. He knows me by name. He knows my handwriting. He has watched my balance drop and refuel, and drop again like a patient on a ventilator. "Mrs. Novak." He smiled, and then his face grew careful. "How can we help you today?" I said, surprised at how steady I felt. "To cancel every automatic transfer to my son's account. And I need to make sure no one else can access my funds. No joint accounts, no phone permissions. Just me," he blinked. "Are you certain?" He had watched me arrive on the first business day of every month. He had seen me sign papers with hands that trembled a little. He had handed me tissues once, the day the transfer failed and I thought I had failed them. "I'm certain," I said. "And I would also like to discuss how to protect my assets if anyone contests my decisions." He nodded then like someone who had been waiting for a ship that they weren't sure would ever come. While he typed, my phone vibrated on the desk. Once, twice, 10 times. It didn't matter. My hands were busy signing my name on my life. "Mrs. Novak," he said softly when we finished. "For what it's worth, I've seen people as generous as you, but rarely someone as brave. Please call me if you need anything." I thanked him and walked into a new, lighter kind of air. When I reached my street, my stomach dropped. 2 cars, a dark sedan and a hatchback, sat in my driveway that did not belong to me. I could see movement through the sheer curtains. Keys. They had keys. I had given them keys because I believed that's what mothers do. Give access. The doorknob was warm when I turned it, like a pulse. In my living room, my son sat on my sofa with his face in his hands. Alina paced like a caged thought. At my table, a stranger in an expensive suit leafed through a folder of my documents. My bank statements splayed like flayed fish. "What exactly?" I asked, placing my purse down very carefully. "Do you think you are doing?" They looked at me as if I'd walked into their house unannounced. Alina spoke first. "Marta, thank goodness. We were worried." She gestured to the man with the folder. "This is Dr. Hartman, a family law specialist. He's here to help you." Those words had been arranged before I arrived. "Help me," I repeated, trying on the shape of it. "By reading my private papers at my table?" Lucas stood and placed his hands in the air, palms out. "Mama, your behavior has been erratic. You cut us off with no explanation. You won't pick up the phone. We're concerned." The way he said erratic made me think of a file already labeled. Alina moved closer. Her voice dipped in honey. "We know loneliness can make decisions feel heavier," she said. "At your age, it's very common to—" "At my age," I said quietly, "I have learned the difference between concern and control." I turned to the stranger. "Close my folder and set it on the table." He smiled with a patience that insulted. "Mrs. Novak, your children are considering a temporary power of attorney, purely to help manage things while you take time to—" I picked up the folder and carried it to the kitchen trash can. It fell like a door closing. "There will be no power of attorney," I said. "Not today. Not tomorrow." Alina flinched. The mask slipped. "You can't do this to us," she said. And there it was. Us. We're your family. We've planned around your help. We have obligations." Lucas added, "There's the visa you co-signed. The car." The life they'd chosen had my credit woven into it like a hidden thread, and pulling it made their fabric pucker. "The only obligation I have," I said, my voice calm even as my heart ran laps, "is to myself." "Look," the lawyer tried again, "if your choices are truly in your best interest, why not allow oversight until—" "Because the person who has to live with my choices is me," I said, "and because oversight is not the same as love." He recovered, flipping to another script. "If you refuse, your children can petition the court for guardianship on the basis of diminished capacity." The sentence landed like a cold hand on my chest. I looked at my son, the boy who once fell asleep with his face pressed to my arm, and woke with my skin on his cheek. "Is that what you want?" I asked him. "To tell a stranger in a robe that your mother is incapable because she stopped paying your rent?" He looked away. Alina did not. "We'll do what we have to," she said. "Then do it," I answered. "But leave my house, now." They took longer to go than it should take to stand and walk. Lucas paused at the door. "You'll be alone," he said, as if it were a curse. "And one day you'll need us." I looked him fully in the face. "I have needed you for years," I said. "And you were not there." The door closed on the last word like an apology no one offered. I slept badly again. But this time it wasn't the disordered sleep of grief. It was adrenaline. It was strategy. At dawn, I put on my best jacket, the black one I wear when I want the world to believe me. I drove to the office of a lawyer I had met 12 years ago while sorting out my husband's estate. Clara Weiss, smart as a storm and twice as swift. She listened without interrupting, her pen still. When I finished, she nodded once. "What they attempted yesterday," she said, "is called undue influence at best and elder financial abuse at worst. We'll do 3 things immediately. 1. Change your locks and install a security system. 2. Document every transfer you've ever made to them and every text or call about money. 3. Get you an independent medical and cognitive evaluation so any accusation of incompetence dies on the vine. For 3 hours, we built a case out of line items and dates. While we worked, my phone vibrated across the table. A trapped bee, unknown numbers, messages. Call me now. We need to talk. This is urgent. Clara took my phone and slid it into a folder. If it's truly urgent, she said, they can call my office. On the way home, I stopped at Summers Hardware, where I've bought light bulbs and paint for 20 years. The owner, Old Man Summer, stood straight as the aisle of shovels behind him. What can I do for you, Mrs. Novak? Locks, I said. The best. He whistled softly when I told him why. We'll have you safe by supper time, he said, and called to his son, who installs cameras and never once made me feel foolish for asking a second question. By afternoon, the house hummed with the small industry of people who know how to protect. On the camera screen, my porch gleamed clean as a promise. When the phone rang again, I let it go to voicemail. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my sister, Lydia, to talk about anything else. She listened to my story, quiet as snowfall, and then said, Marta, do you know how often you told me how much money you'd given him, instead of how much love he gave you? The words landed like a bandage you didn't know you needed. I was proud, I said softly. I thought generosity would stitch us together. Money stitches the mouths of hungry wolves, she said, but it doesn't teach them to guard you. There are doors you don't close until someone tries to walk through them without knocking. The next morning I went to the cemetery with lilies and a soft brush. My husband's headstone had gathered the dust of neglect. Joseph, I said, and laughed because my voice sounded like a girl's. If you're listening, I'm finally learning to choose myself. The wind leaned through the pines like approval. I scrubbed the granite clean and told him everything, including the parts that made me ashamed. The way I had chased love with rent money. The way I had confused access with belonging. When I left, I felt taller by an inch. The day after that, a social worker came to my door with a smile practiced for difficult homes. Wellness check, she announced, showing a badge that looked like authority. We've had reports of erratic financial behavior, social withdrawal, and increasing paranoia. The checklist had been written by someone who had never met me, but who wanted my life to look like a decision someone else should make. Of course, I said. You can sit. My lawyer will join us in 20 minutes. She hesitated. She said there was no need. I insisted there was. When Clara arrived, the social worker's sentences began to change shape. When I produced receipts and calendars and a freshly notarized cognitive evaluation from a doctor who spoke slower than God and tested me harder than any exam I've taken, the tone changed again. By the time she left, she had apologized for the intrusion and promised to close the file. Clara walked her to the curb and said, If you feel compelled to check on someone, I can give you a list of young men who can't pay rent, but somehow afford new gaming consoles. We laughed. Not because it was funny, but because laughing makes room for breathing. That night, my neighbor, Elsie, who had lived next door for years but had never had time for coffee, knocked with 2 cups and a slice of plum cake. I heard voices the other day, she confessed. I wanted to make sure you're okay. She sat on my sofa and listened with the kind of attention that doesn't ask for anything in return. My son tried a version of this 4 years ago, she admitted. Emotionally, financially, same choreography. Saying no ruined us for a while. Then it saved us. The words saved us felt like a stare I could see in the dark. I wish I could say it ended there. 3 weeks later, a courier knocked with a thick envelope that made my palms sweat. A petition, guardianship, incompetence. They had found a slick attorney, and a cooperative neighbor who liked to gossip, and a pharmacist who had been tricked into signing something that sounded like concern. They had empty words and one steady motive: to turn my life into a faucet they could control. I sat very still, and then called Clara. "We fight," she said simply. "It will be ugly. You will hate the part where they pretend to love you, while counting what they'll get. But we will win." The courtroom was all varnish and silence. Lucas wore a suit that didn't fit him right, too new in the shoulders. Alina wore black like she was attending the funeral of my independence. Their lawyer spoke about me like I was a weathered door someone kind should repaint. "Paranoia," he said. "Isolation. Undue influence from neighbors and counsel." He made protection sound like poisoning. They called Alina first. Tears arrived on cue. She spoke of my decline. She spoke of my confusion. She did not speak of wedding photos that glowed with a mother I'm not. Clara stood and asked a single question that froze the room. "When was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Alina's mouth opened and closed on nothing. "Can you give the court a date?" Clara asked. Alina could not. "Is it true," Clara continued, "that you held a wedding without inviting your husband's mother, and later asked her for rent money?" Alina stammered something about intimacy and stress. The air in the room felt like a tide going out. Lucas spoke next, and there he was, the boy I raised, standing in a place where men swear to tell the truth. He said I had changed. He said others were manipulating me. He did not say that I had paid his way through 30 months of adulthood. When Clara asked him how often he had visited without leaving with something paid for, he stared at his hands. They called a neighbor who liked to feel important. He said cameras were paranoid. He said guests meant chaos. He said yelling when what he heard was me reclaiming my house. They tried to file a letter from the pharmacist who now apologized, twice in the hallway and later in open court. When our turn came, we did not bring performance. We brought paper, bank statements lined up like soldiers, text threads that made a song out of "can you," and we need screenshots, dates, transfers, signatures. Dr. Barta, the psychiatrist with the quiet voice, testified that my mind is sharper than many 40-year-olds. Elsie testified that saying no is not a symptom, but a cure. When I took the stand, I did not cry. I did not apologize. I described simply the texture of 3 years, my feet on the pavement to the bank, my hands on heavy grocery bags, my chest in the doorframe when my key turned and found strangers at my table. I said, I am not confused. I am finished. When the judge went away to think, Clara squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever happens, you have already survived the worst." He returned in less than an hour. "Mrs. Novak," he said, "is competent. The petition is denied with prejudice." The wood paneling behind him looked kinder then. My lungs filled like bellows. I stood without shaking. In the hallway, Alina's face curdled around the eyes. She whispered something to Lucas that I couldn't hear, and then did not look back. He turned once, the old softness almost visible, and then it was gone. There are some doors you lock because you must. There are other doors you leave unlocked with a chain across them, so mercy can slip in if it ever learns how to knock. The next morning, I changed my will. It had a quiet twist I had never needed until now. Years ago, after Josef died, we bought a small lakeside cabin with money we never told anyone about. His idea. My, yes. A place with crooked floorboards and a dock that groans when you step onto it. A place where Lucas learned, small and sunburned, to bait a hook and laugh when the fish got away. I had planned to leave it to him, as a kind of apology for a world that does not keep fathers around forever. Clara slid the new will across the desk, and I signed my name to a different kind of hope. The cabin and my savings now go to a foundation that pays rent for seniors when their children forget what rent was originally for. A trust will be there for Lucas, but only if a letter arrives, once a month for a year that does not mention money. Words cost nothing. Sometimes they are worth everything. I sold my house close to where my heart had been stomped flat and moved to a small apartment near the conservatory, where the air smells like dirt after rain. I joined a painting class. My hands remembered the way color climbs a page. On Tuesday mornings, I volunteer at the legal clinic, where Clara teaches people exactly like me that no is a full sentence the law can hear. I planted basil in a window box, and sometimes, very lightly, I touch the leaves and think of the day I learned how to say enough. Every now and then, a car like theirs slows in front of my building and moves on. Sometimes an unknown number tries to see if I still answer. Once a postcard arrived with a picture of a beach town I used to say I wanted to visit. No return address. 3 words. Are you well? I placed it on my dresser, beside a photograph of Lucas at 5 with a cardboard crown, and I told the room the truth. I will not tell you, I do not grieve. I grieve the boy with the goose crown, the teenage son who taped his first-place ribbon to the fridge, the young man who kissed my forehead before his first big interview. I grieve the life where my money was a gift, not a leash. Not every story ends with a reunion. Some endings are quieter, braver, the kind where a woman walks alone into a new life and discovers solitude, is not punishment. It is a room where you can finally hear your own voice. If you're listening to me now with wet cheeks and a burning in your chest, take this with you. Love that demands your wallet. First is not love. Love that keeps you out of rooms while asking you to pay for the lights is not love. Family that threatens your mind to access your account is not family. You do not need permission to keep your name on your own life. On Sunday mornings, I sit on a bench outside the conservatory with a paper cup of coffee and watch small boys chase pigeons the way Lucas chased geese. The pigeons always lift at the last moment, their bodies a gray confetti. The boys laugh, breathless, certain that next time they'll be fast enough. I lift my face to the light and make myself a promise I should have made sooner. I will let love in when it arrives with empty hands and a full heart. I will not mistake dependence for devotion again. A year from now, if a letter arrives each month that tells me about weather and music and what he cooked last night, about a book he read, and whether the moon looked big above his block, if 12 letters arrive with no sums in them, I will unlock a small door in my will that swings toward him. If they never arrive, that door will stay shut and light will still come in from someplace else. Either way, I am lit. They asked me in the comments, the last time I told a story, what I would say to the woman who is still in the kitchen with the basil and the phone ringing and a please balanced on her tongue. I would say, set down the leaves, turn off the stove, open a notebook, write the truth in numbers and in words, and then call someone who will sit on your sofa and drink coffee while you dial a lawyer. Do the thing that feels like tearing a map. You will still find your way. My name is Marta. I am 71 years old. I learned late, but I learned. The people who laughed while they locked me out have nothing left to take. The people who stand at my door now do not knock with their knuckles. They knock with their hearts. When I water the basil, the kitchen smells like the day I said no. The plant is thriving. So am I. If you heard yourself in my breath, tell me. If you disagree with me, tell me gently. If you are about to call your mother only when the rent is due, hang up and try again with different words. And if you are a woman who has forgotten that enough is a word she is allowed to say, borrow mine until yours comes back. And yes, before you ask, if you were wondering whether there's any part of me that wishes I had been there under those rooftop lights, clapping and crying into a silk handkerchief, while my son kissed the woman he chose. Of course there is, but I know what those photos do not show. The hand under the table that gestures transfer, and the glass that toasts to a future written with my ink. Weddings should begin a life. Mine did. It just wasn't the one they planned for me.